Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Lumix S5II, the first Panasonic interchangeable lens camera with hybrid face detection autofocus system. After years of speculating about what it would be like to have the face detection in some otherwise great Panasonic cameras, it is now a reality and it is good, but more about that later. The new autofocus system is definitely the main talking point, but the S5II offers much more than that at a very competitive price point, so in this video we will take a look at the performance and the feature set of the S5II, and I will try to help you decide whether it is the right hybrid full-frame camera for you. The S5II looks similar to the original S5, but there are some significant physical differences. The first one is a larger viewfinder unit which contains the cooling system. The grip is also different, but more on that later. S5II is still a very compact camera. It is about 13.5 cm wide and it weighs 740 grams. The build quality is great. It uses a magnesium frame, which is to be expected, and most of the front side is rubberized with a nice grippy texture. It is comprehensively weather sealed, including that active cooling system, so it should be able to withstand pretty rough conditions. Lumix S5II uses a 24 megapixel backside illuminated full-frame sensor, and let's just say that there is a high probability that it is made by Sony. It is a similar sensor to the one used in S1 and S5, but it has faster readout speed and it is combined with the new L² processing engine. 24 megapixels is still enough. I wouldn't mind a bit more resolution, but for intended purposes and especially for a more video-centric camera, it is completely fine. Also, there is no low-pass filter on this sensor, which means that it captures more detail than some other 24 megapixel full-frame cameras. The ISO performance is identical to the original S5 and frankly to all other backside illuminated full-frame sensors after downsampling. ISO 3200 is very clean and perfectly usable. There is some noise at ISO 6400, but it is still usable for the majority of publication platforms. ISO 12800 is still usable, you will see some noise, but it is okay for online publishing. ISO 25600 is an emergency option. The noise is clearly visible, but just like with other sensors probably made by Sony, it can still get the colors right. S5II uses dual native ISO much like the S1H. Unsurprisingly, the dynamic range is also pretty much the same as with other backside illuminated full-frame sensors and therefore outstanding. For digital publishing, you have basically unlimited options to use highlights and shadow sliders. I generally don't think that the dynamic range will limit your printing or publishing options as long as you avoid using very high ISO. The colors out of the camera are very similar to the S1 and S5 and therefore very pleasant. Panasonic likes to go for relatively high saturation and contrast in the standard setting, but I don't mind that. I think that it looks good. I also greatly appreciate the option to choose cold or warm bias for automatic white balance. I would say that the colors are something between Sony and Canon, which is not a bad thing to say. 96 megapixel pixel shift mode is also available and it works very well. Not every manufacturer offers that in this category, so it is very nice to see. So the S5II is the first Panasonic interchangeable lens camera with hybrid autofocus system with 779 face detection points. Let's start with video autofocus, which is great. I've done all of my usual tests and it was absolutely flawless in all of them. First of all, there is no hunting whatsoever. It is extremely reliable, accurate and confident. Panasonic has been working on the contrast side of the hybrid system for years now, and now they have the face detection to stop the transition in the right moment, so the result is as good as it gets. The speed and responsiveness can be adjusted in the menu, but Panasonic has worked a lot on fine-tuning the default setting and that actually worked very well for me. Subject detection and smart features of the autofocus system have been strength of Panasonic even with contrast-based DFD system, and now it works even better. Eye detection and tracking is pretty much flawless. It can also detect other subjects such as animals or vehicles. The tracking worked great even in very difficult situations. I wasn't able to fool the autofocus in any of my video tests. At the current level of technology, it is pretty much perfect in video mode. There is not much more to say there. In stills mode, it is just as accurate and reliable. There is no hunting whatsoever and it has no issues in the low light or backlit situations. The speed is quite solid, but it is not as snappy as the fastest autofocus system in the stills mode. I suspect that this might be caused by the autofocus motors in the lenses that I've tested it with, since they are probably optimized for contrast autofocus and therefore use autofocus motors with lower torque. I will try to use it with Sigma lenses later on. The tracking is actually quite solid though. I was able to get quite solid hit rate when walking towards the camera. Not 100%, but there were still enough images to choose from. One more thing that I want to mention is the best selection of autofocus area modes and dedicated button for choosing them. Overall, I am very happy with the autofocus. I think that going with face detection was the right decision and it works great, especially in video. Contrast autofocus was realistically the main reason why a considerable amount of users avoided buying Panasonic cameras, but the S5 completely changes the situation. S5II is a heavily video-oriented hybrid camera, so let's take a look at the video capabilities. It can shoot 6K with no crop up to 30 frames per second. That includes open-gate 6K 3x2 video. 4K and 4K DCI is fully downsampled. The video quality is outstanding. As expected, it captures a fantastic amount of detail, which is partially caused by the lack of the low-pass filter. It is definitely among the best video cameras on the market in this regard. It can shoot 4K 10-bit 422 and 6K in 10-bit 420. The bitrate only goes up to 150 megabits per second for 4K and 200 megabits per second for 6K, but in the real-world use, it is more than enough for intended purposes. The codecs are very efficient, so I was able to extract enough information for color grading even with Vlog. The Vlog experience is very similar to the S1H. It captures a ton of dynamic range and it gives you a lot of options to achieve your desired look. It is relatively easy to expose and color grade as long as you have some experiences with log profiles. S5II can also shoot 4K 60p but with 1.5 times or APS-C crop. I have asked about this and Panasonic says that full sensor 4K 60p with this kind of sensor resolution and readout speed is not possible to achieve without unacceptable loss of image quality caused by the pixel binning. 4K 60p still looks nice, not as nice as no crop video, but I wouldn't hesitate to mix it with full sensor footage. No crop 4K 60p would be nice, but it is what it is, hopefully next time. The rolling shutter is pretty well controlled. There is some amount, but it definitely won't ruin your footage in reasonable situations. Importantly, Panasonic advertises unlimited recording times regardless of the video settings up to 40 degrees Celsius, thanks to that active cooling system placed in the front of the EVF. I wasn't able to properly test the cooling system in the real world because of the outside temperatures, but I can say that recording at room temperatures definitely is unlimited. Very advanced features such as vector scopes, waveforms, synchro scanning, in-camera LUTs or anamorphic modes and so on are available in the S5II. I will probably get back to those in another video later on. Overall, the S5II is an excellent video camera with very detailed 4K and 6K video and a lot of video features, but you have probably noticed that some very advanced capabilities are missing, which brings us to the S5IIX. This is basically an S5II with completely black exterior and added video features. It will be able to shoot in all intra, ProRes and output RAW video externally. Importantly, it will allow you to record to an external SSD in much higher bitrates up to 1.9 gigabits per second in ProRes. Besides that, it will offer very advanced video streaming capabilities including wireless IP streaming and USB tethering to smartphones. The S5II can shoot 7 frames per second with autofocus continuous or 9 frames per second with autofocus single with mechanical shutter. That is below average, but it can also shoot 30 frames per second with electronic shutter. The sensor in the S5II is not stacked, so the use of 30 frames per second mode will be limited by the rolling shutter. S5II uses an algorithm to fix the rolling shutter in camera, but it will still be visible in more extreme situations. A huge improvement over the original S5 is the buffer, which can store 200 RAWs. That should be more than enough. S5II has two UHS-2 compatible SD card slots. Unfortunately, there is no CF Express compatible slot, but it is not that big of a deal thanks to that large buffer capacity. Panasonic rates the stabilization in the S5II for 5 stops, which is an extremely conservative rating by today's standards. In reality, it is among the best in-body image stabilization systems on the market, and it matches some systems rated for 7 stops or even more. I would say that it is sufficient for static shots up to about 75mm. The behavior of the in-body image stabilization is very predictable, and I haven't experienced any snaps or anything like that. Considering the size of the S5II, I can also say that the size to stabilization performance ratio is very good. S5II also features new E-stabilization mode, which offers a really good compromise between the digital crop and stabilization. It is especially useful if you need to walk with camera. I have mostly tested the S5II with 24 to 105mm f4 lens, which is also stabilized. The IBIS and OIS work together in dual IS2 mode, which is incredibly effective. I've been testing it on a relatively fast-moving boat, and the footage was very stable even at longer focal lengths. Dual IS2 is definitely still a big strength of Panasonic. The same can be said about the handling. The grip is a bit larger than on the original S5 and generally well shaped. A huge improvement for me personally is that it has integrated strap mounts, which means that there is nothing to poke me in the hand, and there is no need to use those annoying little triangles. Big thumbs up for that. The controls are simple and logically positioned. It has 3 command dials, dedicated drive speed dial, autofocus mode selector, and sufficient number of well-positioned function buttons. There is also one extra function button on the front side. S5II uses a new 8-directional joystick. The only thing that I miss on the S5II in terms of the handling is the option to have completely separate settings for stills and video. Other than that, I am very happy with the controls. The menu system is pretty much carried over from previous Lumix S cameras. It is a good menu system and pretty well structured, but the S5II is a very complex camera with a ton of options, so mastering the settings and functions will take some time. The Q menu will help a lot. I actually prefer the full screen approach from older Panasonic cameras, but this Q menu is still completely fine, and it is a convenient way to change the most important settings on the go. The viewfinder uses a well-known 3.69 million dot panel with 0.78 times magnification. It is completely fine to use, sufficiently detailed, and the size is about right. It is not as impressive as the 5.7 or 9.4 million dot viewfinders, but those are more of a luxury rather than necessity. The display is carried over from the S5 and it is great. It is a 3-inch screen with 1.84 million dots. It is very sharp, bright, and generally pleasant to use. The display is fully rotating. As you probably know, it wouldn't be my personal choice, but I think that the target audience of the S5II will appreciate it. S5II uses the BLK22 battery introduced with the original S5. As the name suggests, it has 2200 mAh capacity. The battery life is rated for 370 shots, which is not a great value, but I was still able to get through a day of typical travel shooting with one battery. The S5II can also be powered through USB-C while charging using the power delivery standard. Regarding the L-mount lens selection, I can't say that it is bad. Panasonic and Sigma cover the basics and add some specialty lenses, so there isn't really anything that I miss in the lens selection. Having said that, being able to use Tamron, Semianc or Wiltrog lenses on L-mount cameras would certainly be nice. Personally, I am a big fan of Panasonic's f4 zoom lenses. Especially the 16 to 35mm f4 is an optically excellent lens with a lot of character and very compact design. It is actually one of the main reasons why I will probably buy the S5II. 24 to 105mm f4 is great as well, and I will also make a review of this lens very soon. Panasonic has also announced 14 to 28mm f4 to 5.6 macro. This is an ultra-wide and ultra-compact lens that I like a lot as well. I was only able to test it very briefly, but I will definitely try to make a review of that one in the near future. To sum up, Lumix S5II is finally a complete full-frame hybrid camera from Panasonic that we have been waiting for. It builds on traditional Panasonic strengths such as the video specs or dual stabilization, and basically completes the all-round package by adding the face detection autofocus system. Fortunately, the autofocus is as good as it gets in video and very solid in stills mode. I am very happy to say that the autofocus is no longer a weakness of the Lumix S line. The output is very similar to previous Panasonic 24MP full-frame cameras and therefore very nice. There isn't really anything new that I can say in this regard. As expected, the video specs are excellent with 6K capabilities, internal 10-bit 422 and clever cooling system. S5II will offer even more advanced specs. Cropped 4K 60p is what it is, hopefully next time. It is a capable stills camera as well, maybe except for more demanding fast action shooting, but it is heavily video oriented. The handling, display, EVF and UR are very good and the battery life is okay. Lumix S5 puts Panasonic back on the track, but it will probably be crucial for them to pick up the pace and introduce new products and technologies more frequently. For now, I can highly recommend the S5II to video-focused hybrid users. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section and see you next time.